Hello, I'm Alison Fennell, the Potter and Artist. This video is going to be replacing the watercolour sunflower live stream that I tried to do yesterday and had a complete disaster with. So apologies first of all to anybody who was watching that yesterday and was trying to help me get everything together. I'm going to try and do it again at some point in the next day or so, but for now I just want to record myself painting this sunflower so that you can get on with it. Also, a lot of you had bought the paint along pack, which is here, and this contains all the details you'd need to repaint this again at home in your own time. So it's an additional educational resource, and in it you'd have the outline, details of composition, step-by-step photographs of each stage, and you'd also have some other links to my other videos and other teaching aids there, as well as you'd have the tonal black and white plan and full colour photograph. So that's £2.50 on my Etsy shop, and the link to that is the first link in the description of the text below. So let's actually get on with the painting now so that we can make up for what happened yesterday. So the paper I'm using is 100% cotton rag paper, and it's £90 in weight, and this is actually hot pressed. It doesn't matter what watercolour paper you use, you'll just get a different look if you use rough paper than if you use smooth paper, etc. So pick whatever paper you like. All I'd suggest is try and use 100% cotton because that's the best, okay? Right, the colours we're going to use for this demonstration are Windsor Yellow, Raw Sienna, Cadmium Scarlet, Permanent Sap Green, French or Ultramarine Blue, Windsor Violet and Burnt Umber. If you haven't got these exact colours, just use whatever colours you've got that are closest to those. By the way, these are Winsor & Newton and they're artist professional quality. If you're a beginner watercolourist, I would completely avoid buying hobbycraft sets because they are simply not good enough for you, okay? Get at least the student grade paints from Winsor & Newton or Dale Rowney, because painting with hobbycraft is just going to be a complete waste of your time, okay? They're full of fillers and oil and chalk and things, they're awful. So the brushes I'm going to use for this, I'm going to use a few flat brushes. These are all synthetic flats. I've got a ½ inch one there, ½ inch one there. I'm probably going to use an inch one for the main body of the painting. So I've got 3 flats, then I'm going to use a few rounds as well. So I've got 2 small runs. These are about a size 2 or a 3 or a 4. Any size like that's good. And then I've got about a size 12 in a round as well. I use synthetic brushes, I find that they are good enough. Okay, so my paints are all on my Frank Webb palette, which has got a nice lid to it, and my 2 paints are squirted in there before I get going. And through the week, I like to just give it a little blast with my spray to keep the paints moist and to stop that skin from forming, alright? So we're ready to roll. So the first thing I've done as well is I've taped around my outline so that I've got a nice crisp border to work to as the paint progresses, and it also gives another bit more protection to the gummed tape that I've used to stretch my watercolour paper. This is stretched on a hardwood board. If you want the video on how to stretch watercolour paper, it's also in the link in the description below. So I'm loading up this big brush, this 1-inch brush, and I'm going to wet the whole painting. I'm doing this so that when I put the wash on, it goes on softly and doesn't give me any hard lines. And this technique, which you'll be doing now, it's called wet into wet, because we'll be painting dilute paint into the wet paper. When you use cotton paper, it absorbs a lot of water and it stays moist for longer and so it gives you more working time, so you don't have to rush. See if I can show you. Yeah, you can see the moisture on there, that nice sheen of moisture. We don't want it so that it's running and dribbling with water. We just want it so that it's got a nice sheen on there. Okay, let's mix up the background colour. So for the background, I'm going to use some Windsor Violet and a little bit of burnt umber to give me a sort of dull sort of grey colour. And just put that in the background area. And I definitely want it to be along the borders, you know, of the painting. I'm not going to do it down in the front, just up the top part. And then what I like to do is tip my board to the left, to the right, tip it back and forth a little bit, and that purple then will bleed into the sunflower mass area a little bit, and just fuse everything. Maybe tip it up and down as well. So basically you're tipping it, you know, north, south, east, west, okay? And then you've got that sort of effect. I think that glare, yeah, that's better. No, there was too much glare on there, wasn't there? Is that better now? Okay, so now I'm going to go to a smaller brush. This is my sort of half-inch brush. I'm moistening it. I've moistened this brush. Now this is important. I've moistened it, but now I'm going to flick it to flick off the excess moisture and pick up this Windsor yellow for the sunflowers. And I want to paint this in while the paper's still nice and moist. And at this point I'm not going for detail. I just want to get some blurry yellow areas while the paper's still moist, so that these edges of the petals will blur and be soft and fuzzy, because in another stage we're going to do the hard petal work. This is the soft petal groundwork, so we're not looking for detail at all. Getting some more yellow. This is what I would call a pigmented mix, well, close to a pigmented mix, or a viscous mix, which means there's hardly any water on the brush, and there's a lot more sort of pigment than water. Okay, so can you see now we've just got this yellow mass, right, of fuzzy leaves. And again, if I tip the board, you can see the moisture there. See the moisture still there now? Now that's what we want, for all this to just blur in amongst itself. And I also want to get quickly onto those apples. See, the apples have still got a shine there, because I want to pop a bit of, so that's the sunflowers, leave those alone now. No, actually, forgot one little thing. Into that yellow, pick up a little bit of brown, little bit of burnt umber, and then quickly go in and put a bit of brown on the face. And as you can see, it's blurring very slightly because there's still a bit of moisture in the paper. We're just putting a bit of brown in the face of the sunflowers. There's not much showing there. And don't worry if it flares out and bleeds, that's fine. That's okay. It won't bleed too much because you haven't had your paper soaking wet, it's just got moisture in. But quickly now I need to go on to the apples now, which is going to be picking up a little bit. Again, with that brush I've moistened and flicked. It's not very wet. So the apples is permanent sap green and a tiny little speck. See, a tiny bit of, perhaps a bit more, of French ultramarine blue. Right, and maybe a little bit of water, just a tiny bit. And I want to paint these apples in now. Just get some green on this. Again, this is a soft, fuzzy green. It might bleed a little bit, but it won't feather or bleed too far. We're just getting the green on the paper. I don't mind if it fuzzes a little bit. You know, this is a painting. It hasn't got to be perfect. So that's what's happening with them now, okay? See, there's still a bit of moisture in there. See, that green is flaring a bit there. Don't worry about that. Okay? So let's zoom out now. So that's where we are at this stage. And I could go back in to the background because there's still a little bit of moisture in there, and paint in a little bit more Windsor Violet, but I think I might leave it. I'm happy enough with that. So that's all I'm going to do at this stage. I'm now going to leave the painting to dry naturally. It'll probably take over an hour, but what I might do is come back after half an hour and give it a very gentle hair dry. So I'll see you in the next clip. Okay, the painting is bone dry now. It's been about half an hour, and I've just given it a very gentle low heat dry again with a hairdryer to make sure that the paper is bone dry. You can test that by touching it with the palm of your with the base of your thumb there. If it feels cool to the touch, there's probably still some moisture in the paper, so don't paint on it. Wait a little bit longer, probably another sort of 20 minutes or so, or give it another gentle hairdry. So this is how it's looking at the moment. We've got soft fuzzy edges all around those sunflower petals. As you can see, in places the yellow has bled into the background and fused in places and not in others. We've got a soft brown face in the sunflowers, ready for us to do the harder, more defined work in the next stage. So, and also the apples, they've bled in places, as you can see there. You know, if I just zoom in a little bit more, they've bled a little bit. And don't worry about that, because I think that gives a nice, you know, sort of painterly look to your painting, instead of it being really hard edged. And again, there are the apples on the other side. So the paper is bone dry, and I'm going to zoom in now to show you what work I'm going to do on the shadow under the plate. So if you just bear with me. Okay, the plate. So the shadow colour is going to be the same as we used in the background, which was a mix of pale Windsor Violet and a little bit of burnt umber. So let's get that again. So Windsor Violet and some burnt umber. I've actually still got some left on the palette, but just to show you again, pick up small amounts with the corner of your brush, little tiny bit, you know. Don't stick your brush right in that mound of colour, because you'll pick up way too much pigment. Watercolour works with small increments. Alright, so there's my shadow colour there. So I'm going to paint this now. There's a cast shadow, if I zoom in a little bit more so you can see here. Cast shadow under there, under the knife, and that's actually coming from the apple. A bit of a cast shadow there, coming from the apple again. And there's a little bit of a cast shadow under the plate itself there. around there, and then I'm going to run it off down the page because we'll be putting much stronger shadow in. I'm adding some water now and then blending that down. Okay, so that shadow sort of cascades off down the page like that. We'll leave those hard-edged shadows there. Okay, so that's that little section there. Now, because I want to paint some soft folds in this material, I'm going to have to moisten the cloth. You'll notice that I'm not going to paint it the checkered blue that it is in the photograph. I just want to keep it simple for this demo, because to paint a checkered blue cloth would take an awful lot more time, and anyway I didn't think it would enhance the painting much. I just preferred this a plain cloth so that the focal point would be the sunflowers and not the check cloth. So I'm going to wet all of the folds of the cloth with water. So I'm not touching the apples, so I'll be leaving them alone. And then pick up some of this shadow colour and starting at the base of the painting, bring up some strokes and then taper them away to nothing as they reach the apples. So they'll be much darker at the base with a few like that one there, very pale purpley area, perhaps a bit of soft purple there and there, okay, because those apples would be casting a bit of a shadow. Right, and so now I've got all soft edges in the folds of the cloth at the moment. Okay, so to move on to the actual jar now, I'm going to move to my size 12 round brush for this. Moisten my brush really well, pick up a lot of water, and I'm going to moisten all inside the jug. Right up, you know, and to cut around those yellow petals so that when I drop in my green colours in the jug, the yellow petals will remain untouched. So really moistening this carefully. So I'll just go off camera while I do that. Right, I've wet all inside the jug. As you can see, it's just got some moisture in there. Just top it up a little bit so that when I add the colour, it'll be nice and soft inside. So I've wet down right to the base there, cut around the plate, around that side of the apple. I've cut up in amongst all those leaves. So I'm going to go for a smaller brush now, like about a size 4 brush, moisten that. I'm going to pick up some of this sap green. So I've flicked that brush, okay? So pick up some sap green. And a little speck of French ultramarine blue. And I'm going to paint these stalks in the water, and there's that sort of the curve of the waters there. We'll get a little bit of blaring, So a little bit of flaring in some places, and we'll get hard edged strokes in others. That's okay, we want it to look a little bit runny. So I cut around that apple because the apple definitely doesn't want to look blurry, okay? And this one as well, cut around that edge nice and sharply, so that the jug is definitely looking different to the apple inside. Right, now to make that look a little bit more blurry than it is, you can come along with the brush like this that you've dipped in water and flicked. Okay, so you haven't got tons of water on there, but you've got enough to make things more blurry. So this is how you do it. Just go up and down, very lightly, up and down, using the side, you know, the whole flank of the brush. And encourage some of that paint to blur a bit more. Go right up under those sunflower petals. Okay, so that's made it a little bit more blurry. And what you can do if you want as well is rinse that brush, flick it, pick up a droplet of water and make it run like that. Make a run on purpose, you know, so that it gets that slightly blotchy look that you might find in a jug of water, and tip your board so that it travels up like that. Then I'm going to go for some much thicker paint now, permanent sap green and some French ultramarine blue, and I want to really cut in amongst some of the petals where they would be in shadow, and drag a stalk up here and there. Okay. Right, I need more depth in the base of the jug now, so again pick up some quite viscous gooey green paint with some French ultramarine blue, and I'm also going to put a bit of burnt umber in there as well. That's gone too much now, so trying to get the balance more towards the green, so it's a very deep green blue with some brown in. And I'm going to put some very much stronger shadows now right in there, and again another sort of stalk going up, and some deep shadows now in the base of the jug there, where it'll be really out of the light. I might have a stalk coming up. I just want to push those yellow petals to make them come forward. And then just finish off the side of the left-hand side of the jug because it looked a little bit empty there. And again, with my moist brush, I'm just going to blend some of that dark up. There. Okay. Now what I need to do is drag a line across those stalks to give the idea of the water line in the jug, you know. So what I did was I rinsed my brush and I dried it, and now I got an eraser, and you just pick out a bit of a light like that. You can also do it the same, just pick out some lights, wipe out some lights with this thirsty brush in the actual water as well. So, and again, you could use a flat brush which is bigger, moisten it, then wipe it with your cloth, and then you can cut out some shapes, which gives the effect of glass translucency a little bit more. Okay. Right, so I think we'll leave the jug there now and let that dry. See you in the next clip. Okay, the jug is bone dry now, so I'm safe to paint the apples. Let's zoom in on the apples. So I want to achieve a lot more roundness now on the apples. So to do that, what I'm going to do is re-moisten them one at a time. Well, I do these two together. So with clear water, I'm just going to re-moisten the inside of the apples, so that when I start adding the darker greens, etc., I can keep some soft curved shapes and get that feeling of 3D form. So I only paint the apples, I'm not painting the folds of the cloth. The apples may bleed into each other a little bit, but I won't mind that, because it's a nice painterly look that I'll hopefully get. So paint right on the edge there. Okay, let's show you that. You can see the... Right, I need to get a bit more water on. Not quite wet enough all over. Wherever you paint might affect how quickly your water dries up. It's quite a warm day today, and I'm painting in the attic, so it's the hottest part of the house. So the water is soaking in quite a lot, much more quickly than if it was a cold day, or if it was a different time of year. So you can see the shine on there now. Yeah. That's the amount of moisture you want in the apples, possibly a little bit more, just to give you more painting time. But you don't want it so that it's slooshing around, because if it's running around on the surface, you've got no control, have you? This is what watercolour is about. It's about judging when, you know, the water, when your surface is at the right moisture. Right, I'm going to switch now to a little flat brush, just a personal choice. I'm going to pick up some, let's wipe my palette around. Pick up some sap green. Let's have a little bit of raw sienna to warm these apples up a bit. Sap green, raw sienna. And maybe a tiny bit of French ultramarine blue, very small amount. And I'm going to paint straight over into the one that's adjacent. Just share this warmer green coating over to the second apple. Right, so that's sort of warmed them up now, hasn't it? So into that I'm going to go for a much stronger sap green, French ultramarine blue, and a little bit of burnt umber. That's a bit too much burnt umber. If ever you mix too much of something, you know, you can always move away on the palette to sort of correct it. Now, as you can see, that's quite viscous, isn't it? So I'm going to paint that in to the shadow areas of the apples where they'd be out of the light. Okay, and there's a little groove in there where the stalk comes out from. So I need to soften that off now straight away. So I'm going to moisten a size 2 brush and just blend it up into the apple. And I'm only able to blend like this because I've wet the apple. Rinse my brush, flick it, and I want to blend away this little dark crescent that I put where the stalk is to make that dip down. Same with the other one. Rinse my brush, flick it again really hard, and then blend away the top side of that shadow dip so that it gives the idea of it coming out onto the sunlit shoulder of the apple on the far left hand side. Right, now with a thirsty flat brush, so this is a brush that I've moistened really well and I've wiped in my cloth, I'm going to lift out some nice highlights on the apple. Each time I rinse my brush, wipe it in my cloth and lift out the highlights. This is the equivalent to having like an eraser if you were drawing. And again, because I'm wiping out on a wet apple, I'm getting more or less a soft effect with these lifts. Blend that down a little bit. So all we want to do is try and make them look like spheres. Now before I let that dry, I want to drag out the stalk, don't I? So drag the stalk out with the thirsty brush, same with this one. You can add detail later, I just want to pull it out so I've got some options there. Just going to keep on taking some highlight out of that apple. So that's how they're looking now. Just going to go back in and put a bit more dark green in there. A little bit more dark green in that area. And again with a moist brush, just blend that dark green up again. And I'm also going to add a little bit of raw sienna to warm up the apples there on the top left hand curve, just to warm them up a bit and then soften that off. Okay, right, let's move over to the next apple now, and again I'm going to moisten this one. Give it the same treatment as the other one. Okay, so it's the same idea, it's wetting the apple and dropping some colour in as I did for the other apple. So I'll go off camera while I do that. Okay, this is how the apples are looking now. All I did with that one that's got a segment cut out of it is I wet it, dropped some green in, then I did some shadow work and a little bit of pale raw sienna for the open slice area there. So what I'd like to do now is to go back into the jug and show you how you can get a bit more of a blurry effect. If you bought the printable, you'll find that in the demo I did before, which is not exactly the same but the processes are, the water looks a lot more blurry, and to achieve that you can just get a big brush and wet a band of the inside of the jug and brush back and forth, and now you can see it's starting to dissolve some of the paint a little bit, isn't it? Now come in with a smaller brush and just work it up and down, just scrubbing action, and this will give it a very mottled and a blotchier, runnier look. As you can see there, it's done that. Now those three dark lines at the bottom, those three dark stalks, all look about the same height, so I'm going to try and lose this middle one and make it a bit shorter by scrubbing away at the paint. Okay, so that looks a bit more irregular now, doesn't it? Maybe we can cut that one as well, just wipe away. Yeah, so already we got a bit more of a soft look. And then finally with a dry tissue, press in and take away some more paint. So what we're left with is a jug now that has a little bit more contrast variation going on, which would suggest, you know, so the effect of the water on the stalks that are inside. Okay, so now let's move on to our sunflowers. What we're going to do is work them one by one, and we'll be adding colour onto wet paper. So we're going to leave this all nice and bone dry as it was. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is clean my palette down because it's covered in green. Bear with me a second. Okay, let's go for these flowers now. So I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush, moistening it, making a little bit of a puddle of water there. I want to mix up quite a lot of Winsor yellow, nice big puddle of Winsor yellow. So what I'm going to be doing is adding a little bit of raw sienna to this now to make it a little bit more golden and not so yellow. So that's my mix there. So what I'd like to do now is zoom in and show you how I'm going to do this main sunflower, and then you can proceed and do the others yourself, okay? So using this brush, I'm going to paint very basic sunflower leaf shapes. Can you see that in some places I'm, you know, leaving the center of that petal unpainted? Don't worry about that. All we want is to get the nice tips on the outside in evidence, and you'll notice that the blurry yellow that you've got left from the first wash will add as a nice, it'll give it a glow, it'll look like the yellow is glowing. Don't sweat the shapes of these too much. I know it looks very complicated and there's twists and turns and petals going everywhere. So in a way, I'm going to just twist and turn my brush. You know, this is a painting. It's not a botanical study. It's an impression. Don't feel you have to paint everything, you know, botanically correct. This isn't the style of this painting. So let's get some more in. I'm going to do the others here to show you as well, and then I'll leave the faces to you once I've shown you one face. So what I would do is just carry on with this petal painting in yellow all the way around like that, okay? But before those dry too much, I want to go to a round brush and pick up a little bit of cadmium scarlet, okay? And what that cadmium scarlet's going to do is kick up into the main yellow of the sunflower. So I'm going to rinse that brush now. Flick that brush. It's important you rinse it and flick it. Now we've got a nice moist brush, which I'm just going to blend irregularly this red in places, not all the way, part way up on some petals, halfway up on others. Randomly is the word. You know, you can define some of those sharp tips if you want to, but I've just given an extra bit of kick now with this red. So I zoom out, show you. Okay, so that's the idea there. So I'm going to do a couple more and then I'll let you carry on, or I might just do this in a faster speed. I think I'll do that, okay? So watch me in the next clip. I'll be doing it slightly speeded up. You can, of course, slow it down if you want to watch it more slowly, okay? While I've got that warm yellow on my palette, I also want to drop some more of that onto areas in the jug, like that, just to warm the jug up in places and to run a veil of it across the apples to suggest warm reflected light from those sunflowers. And this actually unifies the painting as well, so another bit of warmth through there. Right, so to now work on the faces of the sunflowers. You can work on the faces while the petals are still wet or when they dry, it doesn't matter. But what I'm going to do for the faces is pick up some burnt umber with some of that Windsor yellow. And I'm going to paint that in. And again, where it, let's just zoom in for you, where it goes up into some of the little crevices between the petals, do that so that it gives it a natural sort of look, especially on this big main sunflower. We won't be doing that much detail on all the sunflowers. Just want to cut around these petals that are bending over the front of the face of the sunflower, which I thought was really nice. I'm just keeping that all moist by running my brush around the sunflower. Adding some more paint. just again making the outline of the brown a little bit irregular where it starts to cut up in between the petals. Okay, so I've got a basically brown face on that sunflower now. What I'd like to do straight away is use a dry tissue and press in on the top left hand side, and see I've got a nice highlight there now. Right, sunflowers want to show where there's shadow and where there's light. Then let's go stronger now, so some more of the yellow, some more burnt umber, and some French ultramarine blue. Much darker now. And let's start doing, I don't know if you're aware or if you look at sunflowers, but they've got sort of like rings in the face, haven't they? So I'm going to put the ring, idea of a ring, different sort of circles of seeds and different things that are in the face, different levels within the face of the sunflower, and I'm going to start doing a little bit of speckle and bringing that speckle within the centre of the face as well. Tiny little speckles as well. Because if we do a lot of detail in the one sunflower, then the viewer will read it in all the other sunflowers. Again, cutting around that petal that's bending over the face, making sure I don't lose that. Okay. So can you see you can see how moist that is, if you see the effect we're getting now. And once more I'm going to press in the tissue and have a bit more highlight on the left again. Okay. So with a small brush now, let's do a little bit more with this brown. I want to start pushing this brown up into some of the leaves to separate them. And I'm going to do it like this. So I've got a small size 3 brush, I've wet it and I flicked it, and I'm going to just drag up on one side or other of the petal some of that dark brown. I'll show you on this one. And that starts defining some of the petals. Just take some of that brown. Out from the centre. Maybe I'll lose that one with brown because it will be quite a dark petal. So drag some of the brown that you've maybe speckled in and brush it over one or two of the petals alternately. So can you see now you're starting to get a different layer of petals being built because of the brown that you're dragging up. I'm going to drag that up a bit more. Okay, and I think that's enough for that. Right, to show you how I'd progress with the other sunflowers to build on, I'll do the same thing now, but get the brown faces on. So again, I'd cut around this face quite accurately. And the brown is the same brown mix as we used in the first the first sunflower face. Get this brown on. And again, it doesn't matter if it has a little bit of a wiggly perimeter. That'll look good. That'll look nice and natural. Okay, you don't want it to be a definite round, and that's where, you know, pushing some of these little brown chinks up into where the petals separate from each other will help us do the same technique as I did there. To make the leaves separate from each other a little bit. So that looks a bit too obvious, doesn't it? So before it dries, let's moisten that brush, clean it, flick it, and now let's drag those brown tips out. And take them around and over a couple of petals here and there. You must work quickly before the brown dries. See how it's forming the petals now? Rinse your brush again, flick it, because after a while you run out of moisture and you need your brush to be re-moistened. I can't really see what's happening here in this little group, and so that's the way it should be. You don't want the viewer to be able to read every single petal, you know, like a regimented display. We want a little bit of mystery and a little bit of lost and found. Okay, so if things get a little bit confusing and mysterious in the middle, that's what I'd like. So I want to go back in now, get some more burnt umber, Windsor yellow, and a little bit of French ultramarine blue to darken the right hand side of this face as we did with the other one, and just I'm going to speckle it in. This one will have less detail than the main one, but we want it to have a bit of that speckle still, because it's sort of sunflower number 2, I'd call this one. Okay, and it's peeking out from behind the yellow petals of the first one. So that's how it's looking at the moment. Let's get in now. Right, and we might have to actually sacrifice some of these petals here because they'd really be in the dark. So with this moist size 3 brush, I'm going to pull out a bit more of that brown and lose the vibrancy of the yellow petals a bit more. Maybe not all the way, because the ones up, the part of the petal up here might be catching some light, but the ones nearer wouldn't. So, and this one underneath probably wouldn't get much light. So don't be afraid to paint the sunflower leaf brown. Don't be afraid to lose some of them. It's a bit more believable, isn't it? So that you've got brown petals up against bright yellow petals. Alright, now this one that's curling over, we need to put a little bit of brown on one and this one. There's 2 curling over. So we need some brown there so that we can then soften them in. So I put some brown on, and with this moist brush I'm going to moisten this pale yellow part of the petal and then let that, touch it in and let it bend over. So that's how you get the sort of droopy petal idea. Alright, same with this one. Rinse your brush, flick it very hard, then moisten that hard line, and then that should bend over as well. There's another one that's bending over here, this one. So I'll put the shadow on the right hand side of it, and I'll bend it over as well now. That one's going the other way. So rinse my brush, Flick that, and this time we want it to come over this way, so I'm wetting the left hand side of the tip of the petal and then touching in and letting that blend seamlessly in to the sunlit side of the petal. This one is bending over to the right, so I want to moisten the right hand bit of the tip and touch in very gently to that brown paint and let it bleed over to the right. So this is how you get your petals to bend this way and that way. Alright? And of course this is the main sunflower. So I'm going to paint the next two, and I'm going to put the clip on fast speed because you get the idea now. Okay, we're just going to be dragging some separators in between the leaves. We don't want a lot of detail in these two. These are the supporting cast. This is the main one. So I'm going to do the next clip without talking, and it'll be at faster speed. As you can see, I've purposely done hardly anything to this last little flower. This is so that we can showcase the main flower, which actually sits on one of the intersections of the rule of thirds, where you cut your paper into thirds downwards and across, and this is where the focal point is. So don't be afraid to underplay some aspects of your painting so that other things show up, and your painting will have a lot more interest then, instead of everything being painted to the same degree of finish. Alright, so let's get on now to this tablecloth in the front, and this will be our last bit of work on this painting. Again, just to show you how often I clean my palette down, before I do the grey shadow area on the cloth at the front, I need to clean my palette down because I've got no mixing area whatsoever. Okay, so I want to keep that colour out of there, so now that's clean. Okay, so the colour of that cloth was, I'm going to make a big, no that's not clean, is it? That's yellow. I need to wash my brush a bit more. I want a big puddle of this Winsor Violet and Burnt Umber. So I'm flicking a load of water onto the palette, adding the Winsor Violet there. And some Burnt Umber. Ooh, I think that's a little bit too much Burnt Umber there. Okay, more Winsor Violet. And maybe just a speck of French ultramarine blue as well. That's it. Right, before I put this on the paper, I've got I've got a round brush at the ready, because I'm going to need to soften some of the edges. So this round brush is about a size 12. I'm going to moisten it really well. Flick it. Flicking is important. Now I've got a brush ready to soften if I get any hard edges, which I probably will. So adding the shadow now to this. I want the shadow to go in to the apples in places, because I want them to hook into the paper and to look, you know, realistically like they're sitting in the paper, and to encourage some of that green paint to maybe bleed in as well, and then run some of it, run it off the paper then. So now this is where I need my moist brush to paint and drag up into it. So this purple will cascade down the paper. So as you can see, I've got some hard edges and some soft edges. I'm going to have that purple over there as well. Moisten it up with a soft brush, a round brush, and I'm going to put in that little bit of purple under the knife there, and there's a little bit of a shadow under the plate there. This is the same shadow mix that I've just used. Okay, then let's have a little bit of cast shadow on the plate there, and in the base of the jug just wipe a bit of that purple in there too. So I want to encourage some of this green to bleed in, which I think will give a nice effect. But I'm keeping this crisp edge of the cloth there. Maybe I'll brush some of this purple shadow up into the base of the jug and encourage some of that pigment to bleed down in as well. I'm going to put some more of that shadow colour on this side of the apple and on that side of that apple as well, and in the crevice between them, just to give a bit more strength, and maybe drop some of that shadow colour on the right hand side of the apple, which would be in shadow. And again, all this is to just unify the base of the painting. And with a moist brush now, I'm going to just drag that line out there, that's sort of like the table line, and take it all across like that. So I've done like a sweeping, unifying brush stroke all across the bases of the apples and the cloth. Now these apples have got a bit of a hard line, so with a moist brush I'm going to soften that hard line away. Alright, and I think I'm going to call that done. One last thing, I would like a little bit of that warm raw sienna yellow colour in coming down into the folds of the fabric a little bit more, so I'll just add that in there, a bit more there, to add the echo of the warmth in the painting. And there's the finished painting. Okay, so again, apologies to those people who tuned in for the live stream yesterday and didn't get it. This is what I was going to do for you, so I hope you can now use that pack that you bought and printed off to have a go of this, doing this still life yourself. I'll just zoom in a little bit. I did put a bit of detail in on the stalks. That's all I did just now because I'd forgotten to do those. And just to show you a close-up of the head of the petal again, and the warm sort of shadows in the folds of the fabric. So you could try doing this sunflower again, you know, using slightly different colours. Maybe have the apples as different colours, or have the glass jar a different colour, and just practice the skills that you've used. So thanks for watching. I'm Alison, the Pottering Artist, and if you subscribe to my channel, you'll get alerts whenever I've put a new video on. But you'll, if you click the grey bell when you're prompted to, when you click subscribe, and you have to accept all notifications, otherwise you won't get alerts for everything that I do. Okay, so thanks for watching. Hope this has helped.